Hello, everybody. My name is Tong Tong, and my partner Adam and I will talk about Ruby today. First of all, we give a little introduction about Ruby. Ruby is a dynamic, reflective, object oriented, and general purpose and functional programming language. It was designed and developed in the mid of 90s by Yukihiro Mas and Matsumoto in Japan. And here's the picture of our creator and why Ruby is so popular. We've been heard about it. It's everywhere. When we go to an interview, they ask us, "Do you know about Ruby?" And when we go online, this is about Ruby, that is about Ruby. Why is that? And its fans call it a beautiful, artful language, and they also say it's handy and practical. Why is that? Well, first off, I want to say that probably because of the creator, he want to make an ideal language out of Ruby. He blended his favorite language, Perl, Smalltalk, FL, Ada, and Lisp, to form a new language that balanced functional programming with interactive programming. And there's details about why Rubies are really popular. First of all, everything in Ruby is an object. Is an object. Have you ever heard about you can make a number as an object? Not in C++, not in Java, but you can do that in Ruby. Pretty cool, huh? And also, the code is really readable. It looks more like regular English, so when you read it, you know what's going on here. And also the unsurprising syntax. Once you had some introduction about programming language, you will pick up Ruby really easily. Not something you can't understand what's going on here. Not like when I was learning Smalltalk. Wow, this is so weird. This won't happen to Ruby. And one thing Ruby had was blocks. That's really, really impressive. It's really marked the Ruby as a reflective language. It shows all reflective ways of using methods. And we'll give you some examples later. We'll show you how reflective Ruby is, and also like the most language like C++, we have um, pro pre-written frameworks and the libraries. Ruby has Ruby gems, so it's helped a lot. In general, Ruby is not very complicated. Simplex of language allows you to write nice things in simple ways. I think that's the most important thing. Why people like Ruby. It's easy to understand, easy to read, easy to write. So, right now, let my partner, Adam, take over. Thank you.
All right, just to continue on with that then. So Ruby inherits a lot of its syntax from languages like Perl, Python, and Smalltalk, because they were generally inspired by those languages mainly. But unlike Python, it's white space independent, so you don't need new tabs whenever you're creating a new conditional statement or a new function. Ruby is also not compiled like C++ is. Ruby uses the Ruby interpreter, so everything's usually done all on the fly. Nice language feature is that there are also no semicolons at the end of the line. So usually a new line character is treated as that you're finished with that line. If you ever wanted to pile things on one line, though, you can use semicolons, but that's usually bad practice. And then underscores are used as a general naming convention, as opposed to camel case, just because, well, I don't know why that decision was made, but most things such as variable names and methods are named with underscores. So we'll just start dipping our feet a little bit into the language now. Some interesting features are, start with arrays. Unlike languages that we've dealt with, arrays can be mixed type. So you could have arrays of integers and such, or you could have arrays that contain integers, floats, arrays, and strings, and characters inside them, as you can see for array 2. That will work just fine. You won't have problems with that. Another nice feature is that there's no index out of bounds error, because everything's done on the fly and it's interpreted, so you don't want your code crashing. It's usually, if you try to access something that's out of bounds, you just get nil return, which is an equivalent of null in languages we're familiar with. And like many languages, though, there are many built-in methods that take advantage of array manipulation. However, since Ruby is meant to be read like English, you could guess most of the methods that you would need. That's why I played around with them. Most of the names are pretty easily thought of. Next interesting feature that we'll actually see in the demo program more is hashes. Hashes are a lot like arrays or maps generally we're familiar with, where instead of using indexed key values, you use objects. So instead of like having array indexed by 0, 1, 2, 3, you could have, like for this example, for the person hash, you'd have index 0 would actually be first name, and then last name, then age, and then names don't actually have to be, the key values don't have to be values. You could actually, or strings rather, you could have integers or even arrays to index them. So you're not limited to that. And also as a side note, strings you can use single quotes or double quotes if you want to, kind of like in SQL. But yeah, so you can see examples here. So if you're trying to access John here in this example, you just do person at first name, and this Ruby statement would print out John. Similar with this, if you want to get the key value, you do person.key, and you specify the value, and it would return the key value to you. And just if you're wondering how you would access, like if you used an array as an index, you'd be done just like this, where you'd always just insert it. It's easily guessed because it's consistent throughout most of the program or most of the language. And then another really big important feature that we'll see in the demo coming up is blocks. Blocks are a lot like Lambda functions or closures in other languages, where just chunks of code, usually in Ruby, if you have a single line that you want to include, you just include it inside curly braces. Otherwise, you just use a do-end block, and that pretty much encapsulates of what you want to do, which makes it easily passed into functions. And this is a huge feature in Ruby because everything's an object, and you're calling methods on so many objects, and passing blocks to these methods are pretty much how things are generally done throughout the whole language. So jumping ahead to the demo, I decided to use a program that most of us are familiar with. It's the Homework 2, the Netflix Review Analyzer that we've all done. I just pretty much translated it into Ruby. For those of you that don't remember, the whole assignment was pretty much to read in 2 files, a movies file and a reviews file, and they want to list the top 10 movies based on their average rating, the top 10 users by their number of reviews that they submitted, and also if you input a movie ID, we get some more information from them. So to jump ahead to the demo, we'll first just kind of we'll show off the demo first. To run a Ruby program, all you do is type Ruby and then the file name, pretty much, where it's whatever file you want to run. And I pre-ran it because it takes about 10 seconds to fire up. So as you can see, the top 10 movies and users are shown, and if you enter a user or some movie ID, you'll get more information from that. Nothing too big. We've all seen that before. So now to look at the actual code a little bit. Kind of running out of time, so let's do a brief overview of what we have here, and then save details for the actual class presentation. You can just see the general syntax of how Ruby looks like. Going back to the top, here's your movie class. You can see each kind of section here is always ended with an end statement. You don't need curly braces. to do anything. To define a function, you just start with def, and then you do function name, any parameters it might need. And this method, actually it's not a function, is the constructor for the class, where you have your instant variables are always started with an @ sign, and then you assign it to whatever you need. And then you also have to create getters and setters for each instance, because outside of this class you never have access to these instance variables unless you provide them for it. So these attr accessors create the getters and setters for you. If you wanted to limit them, you could also create attr reader or attr writer if you didn't want the user to be able to read or write to those instance methods for whatever reason. So moving along, we'll just these methods are kind of just an example of how easy it is to do things. And also an interesting thing in Ruby here, this method calculates the average rating, but you don't need a return value because the last thing that you do is what is returned. So this average rating is actually what is returned from here. Implicitly, you don't have to specify that with a return whatever. And then I guess I'll save the rest of the code for the demo because it's kind of out of time here. But yeah, this is generally how Ruby syntax looks like. It's really simple to write. It's actually a lot easier to do this in Ruby, as you might see in the class, because you could write things in a lot shorter notation that makes a lot more sense in